Welcome to the Brand Intelligence Podcast, the show where we pull back the curtain on some of the world's smartest brands and their agencies. I'm William Tyree, here with my co-host, Intelligence Bank CEO Tessa Court. Today, we'll look at how marketing teams are using AI to power the entire content development supply chain, from ideation to automated approvals and ad optimization. Joining me today is Bridget Cleary of the Big Red Communications Group. Welcome, Bridget.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Could we start just by learning a little bit more about Big Red? Just would love to hear how you got into it, where you're based, and anything else you want to share.
Yeah, absolutely. So Big Red has traditionally, but it's one of Australia's biggest independent agencies and has been for 20 years. It's notoriously private, so we don't talk to the press, PR ourselves, enter industry awards. So even being on this podcast is a bit of a new thing for us. And it's worked with very big enterprise brands to do great, powerful advertising, owned by a legend of advertising called Ted Horton, who's in his early 70s. And I joined TED about 10 years ago and ran Big Red for 5 years and helped along with Marty Hungerford in making it a much more through the whole customer journey kind of a business, not just big ad ideas. And then I went away for 5 years. I worked in consulting. And just about 2 years ago, Ted took me out for dinner and said, look, his face in his early 70s wasn't about the future. Would I come back and take the essence of the business, which was better, faster, and smarter at scale for clients' commercial success, and spin off a new entity, which we've called Big Red X or BRX, that's really about taking that DNA, but making sure that we take the best of the old, but take what's available in emerging technology to deliver on better, faster, smarter at scale.
Can you give us a couple examples of BRX? Like how say, customer comes to you with certain needs, what are their problems and challenges, and how do you approach that?
Yeah, I think we typically work with big enterprise-based clients. So in retail, telco, resources, technology. So some of our clients are Optus, AGL, Realtor.com in the US, and they need a commercial outcome through marketing. And so we tend to help in two ways. We can build really powerful brand platforms with ownable assets that endure and can be used for a very long time and build lots of equity. And then the second part of it is we can industrialize the execution of those brand platforms in better, faster, and smarter ways by using technology and then drive constant improvement. So, really industrializing execution through the funnel. And then because you've got time back, you can then spend time testing, learning, and optimizing to drive that improvement. So, that's really the core of what we do. And what a lot of our clients say, one in particular said, what other agencies do, she might show her peers. What we do tends to be put in the board because we drive really great commercial results. So that might be performance improvements that are incremental that compound to a big sales increase. So nearly 20% increase year on year for some clients. Or it could be a powerful brand platform that takes them from number two to number one in the market or helps them reinvest some of their media money back into profit because of the efficacy of the work. So we're very much not looking into the ad industry. We're very much looking into our own world about driving commercial outcomes.
I feel like we are really getting a sneak look behind the curtain today. And is in terms of the root of the technology, is this AI powered? Is it other types of automation? Maybe give us a sense of what's your typical point of contact in an organization, and then how do they specifically leverage those tools?
Yeah. So a great question. We have a model that we call the brand operating system, brand OSS,
Mhm.
which is a trademark we've registered. And at the moment, it's a suite of products and processes that drive automation and AI adoption. So in that instance, it's typically a CMO or a very senior marketer might come to us and say, to adopt those things, for example, look, we've got a great brand, but I've got a lot of pain in execution. It's slow, it's expensive. My team are complaining about dealing with the agency. How can you help me make the work, but also take some of that pain away. And so
Mhm.
what we tend to do is say, we'll get you onto our brand operating system, which is about looking at how you templatize and modularize a lot of work and then drive automation to improve some things. For example, if you're a client that has a special treatment on your photography images and every time it gets retouched, we can build automation to actually make that instant. So you take the time out. And then how do we start to use AI to speed up that process? So we've essentially got two products we talk about: Asset Accelerator and Copy Accelerator, which is building a brand owned AI ecosystem to generate imagery, generate copy, and work in partnership with creatives to get a great outcome.
So when we think about all of these technologies, I've been CMO of a few different primarily AI powered companies now, and sometimes in the past, when I've described it, people naturally evoked a little bit of wonder, but a little bit of fear. And I would always invoke the movie Hidden Figures, and I would say, okay, remember Hidden Figures? They were at the Space Administration, and there were 200 human calculators in a room. Now, that computing power is on the phone in your pocket. But that's not a bad thing because all those people in that room have the calculators and they are empowered and they are doing much, much more impactful work. What's the view of the technology that you allow these folks to wield right now? Is it like that? Is it similarly empowering? Are there people who are fearful of it? How does that work?
Look, that's a beautiful analogy. I might borrow that one from you in future, the Hidden Figures one. I think there's a range. What we're seeing, the typical journey is this: a Boston consulting group, McKinsey, Bain, will be in with the CEO
Mhm.
telling them about AI, and they'll be putting pressure on the C suite to do something with it. The best CMOs that we work with have a really strong appetite for it and often are ahead of that curve. Often they are able to say to the MBB consultant, look, we've already done this. I do find the resistance is in people whose value has been driven by their output. So on the agency side, we've had to do a lot, particularly with creative teams, to get them comfortable with adopting this technology, that it's a partner, not a replacement. And then on the client end, we find often, yeah, people who have been responsible for managing a really big spreadsheet or those things that give them value, and we're saying we can automate it, you do get resistance. "Well, what am I going to do now?" And that change management mindset of it doesn't mean you're going to not have a job. Actually, it allows you to do more, do higher value tasks. But that's not one conversation. I think that requires a number of conversations. It requires also playing with technology so you understand what it is great for and what it's not yet great for. So building some confidence around it. So I think that is the crux of the journey. What I'm seeing a lot with younger people, like younger creatives or younger account management people or younger clients, is it's just they've grown up with, as you say, the calculator in their pocket from the time they're a child. So they've got a lot more comfort with seeing this as a partner. Um, but then also a lot of much older people who have had to adapt to stay relevant are actually really pro adoption because they started in a world before there were Macs or those sorts of things, and they've kept relevant by always leaning into the future. So it's not an age based thing, but it is definitely a mindset based thing. And if people are not comfortable, we take them on that journey.
But sounds this is very aligned with C-level initiatives in terms of your customer base, but it also sounds like it's a really good fit for younger creatives too. Do you feel like it helps the creative product?
I think you need to still have great creative judgment to decide,
Mm.
because a polite way of saying it is rubbish in, rubbish out, right? Some of
Yeah.
these tools allow you to generate ever more content. But if the starting point isn't brilliant, the end point's not going to be any better. I think what it allows the creative process to do is ship ideas faster. One of our art directors has a great comment that all the things he used to see in his head, he can now generate immediately with AI to explain. It's really exciting. So at that conceptual level, it's a great thing. But in industrialized execution, unless you've got the foundation piece right and you've got people that can make good judgment calls around the quality of the creative, it's not a silver bullet.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, we've got one of our great partners is it's a web ops enablement company called Pantheon in the United States. And just to quote something that he said on this podcast, on another episode of this podcast, we were talking about artificial intelligence, and they work with a lot of developers, a lot of web ops people. And his coined phrase for AI is artificial intern. And
Mhm.
it is, hey, this is like having an army of interns at your disposal to do a lot of the work so that your work is more impactful. But just like an intern, you have to make sure, one, that you're master of the prompt, but then also that you contextualize, you are giving it really good data, like you just mentioned, and then also editorializing it because depending on whether it's AI, Gen AI, or whatnot, things can hallucinate a little bit. And sometimes that can be fun. And sometimes that can be a little bit on the other side of things. How do you train the creatives to put really, to basically be master of the prompt and I essentially get the best output out of it?
Yeah, it's such a great question. I get so dismayed when I see online people in creative industries and they've given ChatGPT or Midjourney a very broad brief and then they complain that the output's not good. If you gave that to a human, the output probably wouldn't be that good either.
Right.
So I think even just knowing that is a great starting point. We have taken it very seriously. So for each, we've done hundreds and hundreds of hours on test and learn training to get on brand imagery right.
So I'll give you an example of one major client for whom we've developed AI imagery. We've probably spent 2,000 hours just in test and learn on the training. And from that point, we can develop a fairly consistent prompt structure that takes into account all of the things about that brand.
So we've got a baseline prompt structure that's very elaborate and complex. So it includes things like the lighting, the lens, the tone of voice, the weirdness, because we know that AI can look very perfect. And so you actually need to inject a bit of weirdness. Also, that there's a seed code so that it always links back to the same course. Things that are actually very complex gets built into the baseline and then the teams can play from there. So that's all done through R&D really on each client. And then what we do is we take a lot of time and effort to train everyone. For example, earlier in the year, we shut the whole business for a day, and everybody, whether you worked in finance or admin or creative or account management, all had to go through and learn these things because I can't expect the CFO to think differently about how we work if I don't help him understand it. The same with our company lawyer. In order to develop the best IP advice, we needed to actually help him really understand what we were doing. So I think to summarize that, it's really do the work to get the structure and then really take the time to get everybody on that journey, no matter what their role is, so that everybody respects what goes into it. Because you also don't want it being said to a client, "Oh, it's really easy. Now we've got AI. It just takes a second." It takes thousands of hours of setup and then a second. It's not just instantaneous.
I love the word weirdness because you're absolutely right. It needs that. And I love that you're planning for that in your approach when you actually ask everybody to undergo training and give this education, which sounds phenomenal, by the way. Absolutely love the approach. Do you get much pushback from, say, like a CFO who really does, frankly, need to know how it works?
Do you know, you've got to make things fun. You've really
Hmm.
got effort into making things fun. So that training I mentioned, we hired a big room at a cool hotel for the day. We had breakfast together. We made it interesting. It wasn't like being at secondary school. It was fun. It was about exploration. We had some prizes. And I think you get a lot better response because, yes, probably a CFO is going, oh my God, this is costing X many thousands of dollars to shut the business for the day, but to help them enjoy it and then also understand what the goal is of the business. Why are we doing this? And why does this give our industry a future rather than a death knell? And I think that those couple of things, like painting the future and making it fun, really help.
Hey, Tessa, I'd love to bring you in for a sec if I could. We had some pretty big news here at Intelligence Bank this week, and on the subject of AI. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about that what that news is and the why now of it?
Yeah, sure. We acquired one of our partners, which is called Red Marker. And Red Marker, similar to what Bridget's talking about, is automating content at scale. Bridget and her team are doing the production side of it. And I guess where Red Marker fits in nicely is around the compliance checking. So ensuring on scale, is it on brand? Are the fonts right? But equally important, are the disclaimers accurate? Are the claims accurate? And does it adhere to not only brand rules, but also legal and compliance rules as well that are dictated by different regulatory authorities? In the US, it could be FINRA for investments. Here for banking, it can be APRA, depending on what those requirements are for brand. And again, we're talking about industrial. I love that term, Bridget, of industrialized content production. And so being able to do that at scale, you need, as Bridget said, the prompts to make it great all the time. But then you also need the checking on the other side, because if it's a home loan ad or it's an investment ad and there's a yield or price points, you need to make sure you get that right as well. And so that's how it fits in. And that's really our partnership with Big Red and Bridget and her team, and being able to provide that extended capability to customers as well.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, Bridget, in the context of this ability then to make compliance teams much more effective, and I think also in the face of this idea that I think thanks in large part to AI, such as what you're describing, once you get it set up and you get people trained, the volumes of content that we're seeing teams produce are just astounding. How are your clients thinking about how this acceleration of volume might or might not create additional risk, whether it's brand compliance risk or legal risk or campaign risk?
Yeah, look, the risk element of it is really important. We work with really big brands, and their brand is their promise. They cannot afford to slip up, and we wouldn't want them to. Have been very We've been both aggressive in trial, but also conservative in making sure the legal compliance and risk environment is really understood by the marketing teams, and then also reaching out within the business to data security, legal compliance as well, because they're all owners of that brand ecosystem. And I think that if you are not responsible about that and the risks, there is the potential that people that are a bit more rogue might create really damaging things for the brand. We have been really deliberate about how we manage that risk internally. So, for example, I made every staff member read the data clauses in every contract that we have. We had compiled that. Everyone really understood the seriousness of the risk. We've done a lot of work with our legal counsel and then with the general counsel of a lot of our clients about helping them understand the risk, helping understand any precedents in copyright ownership and those sorts of things worldwide. There's not set law, but there's good ways to do it ethically. Still, just because you can doesn't mean you should. You still should act as a responsible brand or person that respects the intellectual property of others. And you should not bet the whole house. We really make sure with our clients that any AI use, you do a pilot test first on something that's small and safe, and you learn from that. And then before it gets scaled via marketing, it also needs to be scaled via legal compliance, so on and so forth. It's in fact more important than what we've done in the past with people, because of the volume and the potential for the volume.
For years now, corporations worldwide have required things like security and privacy training, especially for the advent of the internet and then application of business, and so on and so forth, harassment. Those are all required trainings. Do you see this kind of training as being something that's going to be common and potentially ubiquitous at some point in the near future?
I hope so. It should be, yeah, absolutely. And I think it's brilliant that products like your recent acquisition actually help fast track that for businesses so that they can have a higher degree of confidence. Because for me, the risk is not in necessarily bad actors, it's in naivety, that people
Yeah.
accidentally make mistakes. accidentally don't understand the implication. So I think both training, but also other tools that can help intervene for safety checks.
Tessa, thoughts?
Yeah, I was just going to echo that. I don't think people intentionally mean to destroy brand guidelines and put out bad work. Likewise,
Right.
I don't think people mean to shirt the regulator either. But we
No.
were talking earlier, William, today that regulators are starting to use AI to find breaches, not necessarily brand breaches, but regulatory and compliance breaches. So, a really good example is on websites. So, you might have a third party SEO agency that's working on a website that's using language that is not compliant, such as we guarantee the best interest rate, which they cannot make that claim. And it's not even visible. You can't even see it on the front on a page. It's actually in the metadata behind it. So using AI technology to find those issues at scale so they can be addressed and corrected is, and I guess from a brand perspective, I think the other thing that tends to happen, and I'm one of those brandophile people who loves all things brand guidelines, brand strategy. When you first do it or you have your brand, it's great, everybody's on board. And then over time, it just slowly starts to erode where people get creative or people have different interpretations. And part of a brand is that it grows and evolves, which is awesome. But it needs to grow and evolve in the right way. And unfortunately, a lot of big companies right now have gone agile and everything's distributed. And I think that's another issue around corporate structure now and what's happening with remote work and everything else. Like, how do you bring that in a way that you're not the brand police, but you're providing guidance that is helpful, yet also creative? So you can expand creatively on a brand idea and it doesn't limit you as well.
Speaking of creativity, Bridget, when you think about, I think when I think about the way that creativity has been valued, and I'm not talking about something like a Rembrandt or something like that, which it's hard to put a price tag on. But when you think about the agency world, I think for the most part, creative has been valued by maybe an hourly rate or a per project basis, things like that. Does the work you're doing change the way we value creativity in the market?
I hope so, and I'm really ambitious that it will. I think there's two parts to it. If you look at the execution end, if one was cynical, they would say agencies have an incentive to take too many hours to do things because that's how they get rewarded. And so when automation comes into play and AI comes into play, that they can't do that anymore. And so that does that mean agencies shouldn't get paid for what they do because it's faster? I don't think so. And I don't think any sensible client thinks that either. Like, we've got brilliant clients. We presented about a year ago what's possible with AI to a great CMO client of ours, and they said, "But how do you continue to run a profitable business?" And it opened up the opportunity to look at how we charge differently and the contract differently. And that's a sign of that person's understanding of the ecosystem and partnership. But we should be judging our work on the value that it contributes, and that incentivizes agencies to do work that's in the client's best interest rather than their own fame. And it also incentivizes clients, I think, to share their results and for you to come to an agreement on how the work contributes to those results. We've got performance linked parts of a number of our contracts. So if we hit X commercial targets, we get upside, and if we don't. And so I don't know if I've answered that very articulately, but I think I'm ambitious that there will be an alignment with cost and
Mm.
value, which can be a really big win for everyone involved. But it takes brave and smart people to start to have those conversations. Like that client I mentioned, and even let people like us helping test and learn with what different commercial models might be. I don't think there's a perfect answer at this point in time, but progress is done in experimentation. So I think it's for everybody in the ecosystem to experiment and start to see where the value sits.
And I think also smart clients know the value of a creative idea. So I know it's since, I guess, computers came out in the 90s and clients became their own art directors, it still didn't give good ideas, right? Like good creative ideas. And even with digital and now, it doesn't mean that they're going to come up with a killer idea that's A on brand, but drives a commercial outcome. And that's the creativity is the hard part, right? Like the automation, the scalability, it's not easy, but it's doable, where the uniqueness is the great creative. And that's hard. And it's hard to, a lot of clients try to insource that and they fail because you need creative directors and you need those creative thinkers who are working on a wide range of problems, who have exposure to that. And in-house agencies, as an example, like they're very good at churning out work and like almost as a production studio. And that's an option for a lot of people who do that, but they never win on the creative idea and they always have to outsource that, or generally, I would say.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think your earlier point around the importance of a strong brand system that enables great creativity is really important. And I think this the right about the internal agencies, and some of them talk to us about that too. They don't have the external view, and they actually don't have that competitive need to do brilliantly because
Mm.
they're not looking at their competitors trying to make sure that they're outpacing them. They're just looking internally. So it's easier on the supplier side, I think, to be a bit hungrier because you're exposed to more and you're exposed to more competitive tension.
You're also not bogged down in politics as well. So the nice thing about having that creative resource externally is you can be brave about the ideas that you put up. You're not worried about your job necessarily, or I mean, you want to win the business, but it's not politically fused. You can say what maybe internal agencies wouldn't say necessarily.
Yeah, it's a really nice point. It's very true.
There's a certain kind of learned, I don't know, like trauma, if you will, with in-house agencies sometimes where I've seen it time and time again where you get folks that are saying, I don't want to take a risk. I don't want to try this idea because it's something like that has been brought up in the past and it didn't go over well, or this or that decision maker doesn't like this. I love the way you're thinking about this. I'd love to know before we finish what's next for Big Red in terms of technology.
I am ambitious that we can productize a more scalable version of what we're doing. I think for tier one advertisers, we've got a really good operating system, but some of that's still just a process. It's not a product. So I would love to productize it in greater depth because I think it's got great applicability for the top 100 advertisers in the world. So that's me pushing myself and thinking big. But in the short term, we're growing really well and we hope that we can keep continuing to help Australian and international clients be better, faster and smarter to get their commercial outcome.
Anything that I should have asked you about that I didn't?
So I liked some of your questions around what's keeping clients up at night that were in the notes about AI. I think I find that really interesting. I think there's a pressure between what they're getting from above around expectation. Like we had one tier one consultancy tell one of our clients, oh, you won't have an agency in 6 months. And the client said, well, have you ever worked in marketing before? I don't think that's true, but their boss is being told that. So I think there's a lot of pressure and expectation on AI that is probably not commercially realizable at the moment. So I think
Mhm.
that's really interesting tension to help clients navigate. Yes, it can start to do brilliant things like your compliance checks. Yes, it can start to speed things up, but is it going to stop you having an agency internally or externally in the near future? I don't think so. I think that's a really dangerous expectation to set.
I think people had the same question when, say, like Photoshop came on. Oh, you're not going to need designers anymore because everybody's going to be able to do it. And then even they made, I'm not going to name the company, but we all know who it is. They made Photoshop for Dummies. That's a company based in Australia. And that didn't even put designers out of work and agencies out of work. I think you're spot on that. It's just really powerful tool. And I think that it's really smart the way you're handling this. Thank you so much for joining us. This was an amazing conversation. Great having you on Brand Intelligence.
Thank you for having me. Thanks, Tessa, for inviting me on. As I said, we don't do these things very often, so it's been a nice little distraction. So thank you.
Well, I'm a big fan of what you do. So I appreciate you sharing that with everyone. And I think this is going to be a lot of people are going to really enjoy listening to this and understanding what's next from, I guess, that content supply chain at scale. So it's very exciting.
Thank you for having me on, and we love what you guys are doing too. It's great to see innovation in the ecosystem.
Yeah, great. All right. Thanks, Bridget. We'll see you soon.
please help us out by rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts. To listen to more episodes and to learn more about Intelligence Bank, visit us at intelligencebank.com.